The images of the devastation in Japan have many people in Canada asking, how prepared are we for a large earthquake? Joining me now is Paul Kovacs, the Executive Director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. He's here to tell us more about how ready Canada is when it comes to earthquakes. So we always talk about the big one in Canada, and we always hear it's not a matter of if, but when. How accurate is that?
Kim, you're absolutely right. It's inevitable. There will be a large earthquake in Canada. In Western Canada, the risk is higher. There's about a 30% chance in the next 50 years there'll be an earthquake in Vancouver, Victoria area that's big enough that people could die, that there'll be injuries, that there could be a lot of property damage. In areas like Ottawa and Montreal, it's a 5 to 10% chance in the next 50 years there'll be a large earthquake. Most of the rest of the country, it's much lower than that. But those communities are ones where there could be an earthquake. It's inevitable. It'll happen someday, and we need to get prepared.
Well, Vancouver, of course, the big worry. You said a 30% chance in the next 50 years. That's a big chance. How prepared are we?
We're prepared. We're doing a good job. I would like to see us do even more, but we're doing a good job. Japanese are a group that were the most prepared of pretty well any nation on earth. But in Vancouver and Victoria, we do take this quite seriously. I would argue in some other communities with a moderate risk, like Montreal and Ottawa, there's not the same kind of awareness, not the same kind of preparedness that we are seeing in Vancouver and Victoria.
So what could we do better then? What should we be doing right now?
There's things that have to be done at the individual level and things that have to be done at the community level. At the individual level, I mean, it's quite common in Japan to have a kit under your desk. If an earthquake occurs, you grab that kit and you will have handy a flashlight, a radio, perhaps some critical papers, a copy of your prescription. I mean, having a ready-to-go kit is something that Canadians should have at their home. You should have it at your work. Schools should know how to have that. It's more likely to see that kind of thing in Vancouver and Victoria than it is in Eastern Canada.
I mean, they just held an earthquake preparedness drill in Vancouver not that long ago. But what about the infrastructure itself? We've seen in Japan they updated the building codes in the 1980s to help, and we saw the dramatic pictures of the buildings swaying but not falling. How prepared is our infrastructure?
An earthquake around magnitude 9 is a very, very strong earthquake. We had one in Japan yesterday. We had one in Canada in 1700, so these do occur here. These are things that we have to be ready for as well. The research we've seen around the world, when they're this strong, when it's a strong earthquake, some of our greatest vulnerabilities is our infrastructure and our older buildings. In part, these are things that were designed before we really knew about modern earthquake engineering. And our systems can get into very serious trouble if we don't do things like upgrade and retrofit and make the investments to take modern knowledge and apply it to all of our existing systems.
And if we don't?
If we don't, then we're going to have people who die. We're going to have fatalities. We're going to have injuries. We're going to have a lot of property damage. We're going to have disruption that goes on for a long period of time. And we're seeing that right now in Japan and a number of other countries like New Zealand and Chile, and Haiti is the poster child of not being prepared.
Well, that's why I want to ask you, what are we learning from looking at Japan and its preparedness and its reaction to this earthquake?
The earthquake in Haiti was a 7.0, and the earthquake in Japan is around a 9, depending on the changing numbers that we're seeing for Japan, which is a much, much stronger earthquake. There were large losses in Japan. If they were as unprepared as Haiti, we would have had even more. So even a moderate earthquake, like happened in Haiti, can cause a remarkable number of fatalities if you fail to prepare. Canada's done a good job preparing. Japan has done a great job preparing, and that's how they got the number of fatalities, injuries, to the level they are now. I mean, it would have been much worse. Nevertheless, these are huge events that do have tragic impacts, even in Japan.
All right, and finally, in terms of preparedness, you mentioned having a kit ready. What should people do, even if they don't have that? What's the best advice for people if the big one does hit? Where do you go? What do you do?
The first thing is to become aware. What is the risk where you are? The risk of a large earthquake is bigger in Vancouver and Victoria and very, very low in Calgary, Toronto, a number of other communities. So understand what the risk is for the perils where you are. It might be an earthquake, but it might be storms, etc. Once you've learned from community advisors, from the internet, from other experts, then find the right corrective actions. Having a kit ready to go is one of the things so that you'll feel more calm during an event, but there are long-term investments like to make your office or your home safer by changing and adapting and adjusting the environment that you're operating in. The Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction and other groups are sources of information about what you can do to protect yourself.
All right, well, as we're seeing the pictures from Japan there, we see how well they are dealing with it, as you said, but at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do, and we're seeing that right now. Listen, thanks so much for coming to talk to us today. Paul Kovacs, the Executive Director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction.
Good to talk with you, Kim.